By far the most recognizable symbol of Mandalorian culture was, of course, Mandalorian armor. Even more specifically, a Mandalorian's helmet. It was central to the Mandalorian way of life, with certain Mandalorians going as far as never removing them. The T-shaped visor is simply iconic, the common visual identity for any and all Mandalorians that adorn the helmet's face across its various incarnations. The specific design of Mandalorian armor evolved over time, gaining more sophisticated features over the decades. With that said, this is every single Mandalorian helmet type and variant explained. Tongue masks. An ancient gray-skinned humanoid species indigenous to Coruscant, the Tongues were warriors from youth and viewed battle as a source of both honor for the individual and their gods. A Tongue who later became known as Mandalore I led his Tongue followers to conquer a new world which they named Mandalore in honor of their leader. As the newly entitled Mandalorians, the Tongues set out to conquer the worlds around their new home, their nomadic nature and worship of war driving them crusading outward as they increased their territory. Under Mandalore I, the Tongue tamed the savage landscape of the newly christened planet Mandalore, slaughtering the gigantic mythosaurs that had made the world their home. Mandalore I was the earliest known wearer of a ceremonial mask, carved from the rigid bone of a mythosaur's sternum, taken from the slain creature's heart, and modeled after the facial features of the Tongue species. Other legendary Mandalorian leaders like Mandalore the Indomitable and Mandalore the Ultimate would be passed down the same mask, which was a ruddy golden color and prominently featured the iconic Mandalorian T-shaped visor. Crusader. Formed by Mandalore I and led by Mandalore the Conqueror, the Mandalorian Crusaders continued to place the highest value on gaining honor and glory in combat. The Crusaders roamed space seeking war, making conquered worlds their home. Mandalorian Crusaders wore the first widely recognized Mandalorian armor, individually customized and often incorporating organic materials, with the hard parts of the armor, including the helmet, decorated with spikes and straps. It had a jagged, organic form that varied from soldier to soldier. The design of Crusader armor was centered on defending its wearer during melee combat, which the ancient Mandalorians considered to be the most honorable form of battle. Crusaders often employed an early version of the more modern jetpack and rode the deadly Basilisk war droids into space combat. Have you ever wanted to get your very own high-quality lightsaber, but it seems like every online saber store is charging an arm and a leg? Well, let me introduce you to Saber Council. SaberCouncil.com is a brand new lightsaber store that sets out to offer the most affordable lightsabers on the market, bar none. And right now, they're also running their cheapest sale of the year for Black Friday. All sabers are 20% off. No discount code needed. It automatically applies at checkout. 20% may not sound like a lot, I know, but their lightsabers are already so much more affordable than any other store, with their Padawan RGB sabers starting at just $66, with the 20% discount bringing that to less than $53. Saber Council has some of the coolest custom saber designs out there, and if replicas are more your thing, they have a huge selection of all of your favorite characters. So don't miss out on Saber Council's incredible 20% off Black Friday sale, running from now until Cyber Monday. Just head on over to the link in the description and take your seat at the Saber Council. Neo-Crusader. During Mandalore the Ultimate's reign as Mandalore, the Neo-Crusader armor was designed by Cassis Fett for use in the Mandalorian Wars to foster a sense of unity among the many species being recruited into the Neo-Crusader movement. Neo-Crusader armor was standardized, with suits colored to correspond with the position of the wearer. Silver for veterans on the front line, gold for field marshals, crimson for rally masters, and blue for all others. Later in the war, new armors were developed for use by standard units, such as the Neo-Crusader shock troopers, whose helmets had an even more pronounced T. The armor had a few advantages over the early Crusader armor, including a harder surface. Super Commando. A millennia later, the Mandalorian Super Commando armor was developed to replace the older designs, When you think of Mandalorians, this is likely the armor you picture, the kind worn by Jango Fett, Boba Fett, Din Djarin, and the members of Death Watch. It was no longer full-body armor, but partial armor that left limbs almost completely undefended, and focused its strength on the vital areas such as the torso, head, and groin. The new armor was a collection of blast-resistant plates made from Mandalorian iron or Duraplast, which were attached to a waterproof, armor-weave flight suit. This careful layering of segmented armor plates ensured mobility, which could be further increased by wearing a jetpack. At this point, technology allowed for helmet attachments like rangefinders to become more popular, as the helmet served as the control center for most of the suit's abilities. Rangefinders could track up to 30 targets, while a battle computer inside the helmet allowed the wearer to control the suit's weapons, sensors, and jetpack through verbal commands. The dark macro binocular viewplate offered a variety of vision modes, including infrared, a pineal eye sensor on the helmet combined with an internal overlay display to provide tracking information within a 360-degree radius, motion sensors, an encrypted internal comlink, and a broadband antenna completed the helmet's devices, all of which could be linked to the wearer's weapons or their personal starship. The helmet could also act as an environmental filter system, with a 2-hour reserve tank providing breathable air to the Mandalorian warrior. The classic Mandalorian helmet design could also be seen in the armor of clone troopers who also adopted the T-visor. Even the clone commandos, royal guards, and Imperial stormtroopers' helmets and overall armor were all inspired by the Mandalorians who did it first. Protectors. The Mandalorian protectors served as royal guards for the ruler of Mandalore during the time of the pacifist New Mandalorians led by Duchess Satine Kryze. The Mandalorian protectors were one of the few traditions to continue during the time of this new order. The protectors were trained to show restraint in most situations, but could remain a formidable fighting force. These royal guards wielded staffs and wore a very elaborate helmet to protect their body. This unique uniform represented Mandalore's traditions of gallantry and discipline, while simultaneously rejecting the bloody and violent past of the warrior clans. The T-visor was missing, as this helmet incorporated an open-faced design and looked closest to a real-life medieval knight's. Night Owls. An elite Mandalorian unit, the Night Owl split off from Death Watch following the death of Pre Vizsla at the hands of the renegade Sith Lord Maul, who had proclaimed himself ruler of Mandalore. Those who followed Bo-Katan Kryze became part of the Mandalore Resistance and fought against Maul's Shadow Collective. While there were male Mandalorian Night Owls, we're specifically talking about the helmet design worn by the females like Bo-Katan here. Their T-visor was different, as it featured angular eyes and a nose-like piece that cut down the center of the T. Other female Mandalorians like Sabine Wren and the Armorer also wore a similar design. It's likely the helmet was more for us, the viewer, to tell who was who on the battlefield. Mandalorian. While the armor of those who left Mandalore with Bo-Katan remained relatively unchanged from Death Watch, Darth Maul's new Super Commandos altered their Beskar armor to reflect their allegiance to the Sith Lord turned crime boss. In addition to painting their armor in red and black, some commandos sought to better resemble their Night Brother leader by fashioning horns atop their helmets. And I must say, it looks pretty badass. Several also painted a black handprint across their visors. Journeyman Protectors. Not to be confused by the previously discussed Protectors who acted as royal guards, the Journeyman Protectors were a sect of Mandalorian Protectors based on Mandalore's moon Concord Dawn. The Journeyman Protectors notably flew the Fang-class starfighter and were known as the best pilots in the sector. Their armor was specifically designed for their role as elite pilots. Like Clone Pilot or TIE Pilot armor, it featured a chest-mounted breathing apparatus. Originally aligning with the Empire, the Journeyman Protectors' Skull leader, Fen Rao, later joined the rebellion. Imperial Super Commando. The Imperial Super Commandos, led by former Maul loyalist Gar Saxon, were Mandalorian warriors loyal to the Galactic Empire and considered disgraced to other Mandalorians. Their Imperial Super Commando helmets bore visual similarities to stormtroopers in order to reflect their alignment with the Imperial regime. It was typically all white, however it could be highlighted with various colors to denote status. Saxon, as the Imperial Viceroy of Mandalore, added red paint, and Tristan Wren, while the member of the Imperial Super Commandos, had yellow shoulder tips. Their helmets also had unique visors with much thinner Ts that possessed a unique shape, almost a mix between a Mandalorian Super Commando and an Imperial Stormtrooper's design. It's clear their design was also heavily based on early Boba Fett concept art, which ended up being utilized as the helmet design for the bounty hunter Rako Hardeen. Heavy Infantry. An incredibly rare Mandalorian unit, Paz Vizsla is the only heavy infantry Mando we know of so far. As you can probably guess, heavy infantry Mandalorians wore thicker and larger Beskar armor with reinforced plating and wielded heavy weapons. The idea of Paz Vizsla originated with Mandalorian writer and director Jon Favreau, who wanted to include a Mandalorian who had heavy armor such that they resembled a Mandalorian warrior on steroids. Paz's helmet specifically had a tighter and more rigid look to it, with more pronounced attachments on the side. Crusader Mark III. Developed by the Black Sun during the Galactic Civil War, the Mark III model resembled neo-crusader light armor, developed about 4,000 years prior, but was made from alum, which was less tough than Beskar. Two separated helmet designs were made, one for the Galactic Empire and one for the Rebel Alliance. The armor was worn by several Imperial officers throughout Star Wars Legends, even the Emperor's Hand, Mara Jade. But which Mandalorian helmet or overall armor is your favorite? Let me know in the comments.